Questions? Yes.
I have a question for Gabriel, so it's good he got there in time. So one of the things that you talked about was physical representation and the interrupted immersion, which to me actually seems like it has an absolute value, and I think you indicated that. One of the things you talked about was changing the visibility to avoid the question, what are you, what are you, what are you, which I agree with. But at the same time, right now you've got this enormous plasticity of form where they can be any size. They could, eventually one of them I'm sure will be a swarm of bees, and which leads to whole mind-blowing possibilities. So have you thought about how you can keep that plasticity while also increasing recognizability?
It is a very strong sense of debate about how to go about doing this in the next iteration, because there were some really, really awesome, fascinating moments. Like, it wasn't just plants coming around in plant villages, walking around, talking with one another, and then getting eaten by animals. There was a particular point where somebody came in as a eelgrass weaved basket. So as an artifact of these plant actions and plant interactions, somebody came in as a cultural tool and object within the space and was represented there. Like, and you know, what do you do with that as a designer? Because I sit there and go, do I really need more face paint? Do I need more stuff in there? Because they're on the playground doing playground emergent rules and emergent games that came out of those spaces. You sit there and go, well, they're doing just fine. Why the hell do I need to throw in some costumes in there and up the cost of the camp, which I don't want to do. But at the very same time, if I remove, or if I add in physical representation to increase immersion, I'm taking off, and having had some great conversations with other lenders, removing the cognitive load of having to define somebody else's identity and hold on to that, because how long is the kid going to hold on to the interaction, and am I going to see a different distance of the immersion and a distance of time of the interaction that gets held on to for the entirety of those 2 hours. But again, those interactions are moving, like you saw, pretty rapidly, and at the speed that those kids want to play at, then why not keep doing that? So I don't, you know,
I feel like there might be a key in avoiding traditional costuming, though, like specific movements or hand gestures or ways of manipulating your voice. Things that are outside of the norm for LARP culture might actually allow you to work within that plasticity. I don't know, you're the one doing it, so good luck with that.
Well, I was excited by your work and the idea of thinking of the meta techniques and using that kind of work for more mechanics for identification. But we'll see where it goes after sitting there talking with the rest of the learning scientists and saying, yeah, let's do that.
I have a question for Anna. You mentioned that you're doing this in 70 orphanages, is that correct?
Yeah, all over the country.
Right. So how much contact do you have with individual students?
You see, like, Russia is big, so in every city there is a group of people working in this particular city. In St. Petersburg, when, like, 2 years ago, the station that I know better than it is now, we had like only 3 orphanages in St. Petersburg, but we are spreading broadly. We were like deciding among ourselves who will be in charge of this or that orphanage. So of course we are trying to go to the same students, the same people, because they become familiar to us, they start trusting us. Yeah, but we started to work with corporate volunteers only like a year ago or a bit longer. So it's a bit unstable situation because, of course, they are very eager to help children, but they don't know how. So first of all, we train them, and then they go to the orphanages, and they have everyday work, like 40 hours a week. So this doesn't work so well as I would like it to be. But we are always trying to make the same groups of people entering the same orphanages.
questions?
Would you like to talk about kids?
I have plenty of questions if no one in the audience has questions. Let's see. So Gabriel, you were talking about bringing in some of the stories from the First Nations people in the area. You also mentioned that a lot of these students that you're working with are First Nations. Do you find that there are students who know some of these stories, who know variations on these stories? Is there any kind of sort of interaction going on with that?
There is a lot, and so dovetailing this into iteration one, talking about just the overall camp in another conference. Somebody asked about actually the universality of trying to apply this camp into another space, and we were like, "You're missing the point. The point is seated within local stories, within attachment to land, within those local spaces that are particularly important and relevant to the lands that we occupy and are honoring, and then two, it isn't just the Pacific Northwest stories and songs that we're drawing upon. Any kid that comes in with language, and with songs from their family, with stories from their family, come in and they when they're comfortable with it, when that trust barrier is set up, and they're okay with it, they'll share those stories out. And I mean, it's an extraordinarily culturally intimate and important space that's very, very safe for them, because we are arranging with foster kids as well as kids who come from non-foster families as well. And just being able to bring your own culture to the table is a really important space for me.
Thank you. Yes,
Just
but
a
now
quick question. The mood changer, is that related to coyote at all? The very notion of what people talk about in academia as trickster theory does and doesn't relate to what I'm going to be writing about eventually on transformer theory. It is, and it is similar and yet very, very, very different.
I just had a question. Obviously, when you're going from like first graders to fifth graders, the content that you're teaching changes. But have you found, or do you foresee finding, that the complexity of the LARPs themselves will change?
Yes, and I'm excited about that. I enjoy LARPing with 7 and 8-year-olds, but I think sometimes when I'm designing games or debriefing with them, I'm pushing for more to go deeper into the content, but they're 7. So they can't, and really are doing a lot. And so I am excited about the possibilities of what I can create, experiences I can create for 10 and 11-year-olds. And I've been teaching second grade for 9 years, so there will be a learning curve for me in terms of understanding them and how much they've developed in the 3 years since I taught them last. But yeah, that will be an interesting next step for me.
You all have a method that you're working with, and it sounds like that you want to spread it. Do you have any vision on how to spread it to the rest of the world? It's for all of you. I would very much, just shoot if you don't have a plan written down, just open discussion here. We are here for the next couple of days.
Okay, may I start? We call it boxes. I don't know how to call it in English. Boxes. Yeah, we make our LARPs in boxes so that we can spread it into Russian cities, and we are open to communication and to translating it. So it is a great idea, and there are not all of them are really well collected like in a box, but we are continuing this work. And especially when we have some granting, so that when there is a person who can spare his time for doing this. And we were trying to make contact a year ago with Polish guys, but someone disappeared, so it stopped at some path. But we are ready to share everything.
I have a similar idea. I don't know if anyone knows these FOSS science kits that we have in American schools. They're boxes of materials and lesson plans for science lessons for elementary school, I think. So it's been in my mind to spend summers actually finishing these LARP scripts. Some are more finished than others in my Dropbox collection, but to actually get all these resources and put them in a box so second grade teachers in my school and neighboring schools can rent out these boxes and they won't have to create everything that I create. So it's on the list, but I'm just doing it. And I also heard that Bjarke and Lizzie Stark created and play tested the Romeo and Juliet Edularp yesterday and saw that it was sponsored by the Kennedy Center. And then after I noticed that, I emailed the Kennedy Center. My school is 5 minutes down the road, and I said, I'd searched on their website before, and you must do something like improv in education there. I couldn't find any resource.
It's the Arts
Edge. So I emailed them, and Alan Brooks called me, and we chatted, and he said, when I come back from this conference to talk, and I shared all of my things. So perhaps something can happen where Edularp can spread farther around DC schools if I'm connected with the Kennedy Center in some capacity. So that's the next idea. And I'm pretty practical, so I don't have like huge dreams. I figured little by little, like around Horace Mann and then like around DC. I led professional development for 2 years in DC public schools. Didn't do it this year, but hope to continue. And then all of these 70 teachers I've trained, I'm trying to gather them back together to see if they're still doing anything with this, or like write LARPs together, because I'm finding the load of doing all the writing myself.
I can't. They're who knows how many federally recognized tribes there are in the lower 48 states. 565 plus. 565 plus. 29 in my own state. 3 over here in Texas. So the very notion of universalizing the kinds of work that I'm trying to do is, one, disrespectful to each and every single sovereign nation. And that's what we are, sovereign nations, as domestic dependent nations underneath the United States. To say that we can universalize these kinds of aspects is to say that there's a Pan-American Indian identity, and it just doesn't work like that.
So, Anas, who asked the question, is cheating a little because I work with him in my daily life. So the things I say are actually mostly his plans. But we have a three-pronged approach. One is that we document as much as possible. We publish books. I think we published book number 21 or so, or I did last year. So we try to get documentation out there and make it freely accessible for people on stuff we do. Second is that we try to get some more stuff done in English. Last year we did an EduLARP sketch competition and I think we got like 18 or 20 sketches in that are freely available online, so anyone can use them. They're not fully complete LARP, but are like enough to get the general idea that with a little tweaking to your circumstances, you can just put it into a classroom made for different levels of education. And we're going to do more of that. And third and not least, we think it would be smart if we at some point got the process of making a global LARP organization going, if for nothing else, just for the purpose of creating spaces so you know where to find the other people, because the world and the digital world is a vast space. And just finding out who people are is right now super dependent on personal networks, and they tend to be rather unstable in the long run. So that's what we're doing. But there'll be, Hans, do you want to say more on that? No. We'll just tease now. There'll be more.
So it strikes me that the hardest thing about spreading any kind of LARP system, but particularly EduLARPs, is that there's so much love and passion that goes into the creation, but not into the documentation. People get burned out afterwards. And I think we need some administrative assistants that we can hire that know how to write a LARP script in a very brief and concise way, and that we can just, you know, like full-time hire to take raw materials that people create and to try to translate them in a way that's still authentic, but that actually being reproducible and in a format that is consistent, so that people know what to expect.
Yes, it was, you do a lot of training of trainers. You're training people locally to run the labs.
Yeah, I did in St. Petersburg.
Yeah, but with the rest of the country to train volunteers to go out with a lab in a box and put it up.
Yeah.
How do you do that? Do they play the lab themselves?
Yes.
Or
Yes,
what do they, how do you do
they
it?
come, they have an introduction of what is the lab going to be, then they play, then we have debrief. And after the debrief for them, we have a, like a kind of instruction, how can it be and what can the situation look like in the other runs with the teenagers and what other specific things with them. And if we know what orphanage they are going to visit, we of course tell them what problems they can. Thank you.
I do have a question, but I want to make sure John doesn't still have one.
I do have one, but you can go first.
Awesome. So this actually goes back to the documentation thing. It's directed specifically at Amanda, but I have broader ideas because you mentioned Reggio Emilia, which, to be honest, I'm not sure how broadly recognized the term is within this room. But because you brought up Inspector, documentation and display of the process of education is an essential part of that. And I know you were talking about it specifically for pre-K. And the beginning of this thought is I was wondering if you'd incorporated that documentation into your process as a LARPer. To continue that idea and tagging on to what Sarah was saying, I was thinking it could be an empowering thing to have students be a part of it, because that would be the Reggio idea, is to have them document via writing comments or taking pictures. And that in turn made me think about Treasure Trapped, which we watched last night, where they had the documentary filmmakers who they incorporated into the process of the Monitor Celesta, or Lizzie Starks leaving Mundania, which she participated in several things as a journalist, which she was both in a real and fantastic sense. So I've got a broad context that I've just kind of expanded outward, but also specifically I was wondering about your work.
Well, one plus about Horace Mann, my school, and me working there is I don't have to turn in these lesson plans, which meant for years my big ideas and plans were on napkins and old envelopes. And I'm like, I have a great idea. I write it down and I just do it. When I came back from Finland and I was like, wow, this is great and I think other people should do it, I became serious about typing my plans so they are shareable with other people in a way where I never felt I needed to before. They were just my unit plans. Maybe somebody would use them, but who knows. So I have been documenting all of the games and LARPs we played to the best of my ability. And I have many of them. And pictures of our LARPs, pictures of kids' reflections and artifacts they've made before, during, and after LARPs. I have a couple of videos. I bought not a GoPro, but another camera you can wear. And in our mystery dinner theater LARP, while they were learning about elements of mystery chapter books, I wore that while we played in the classroom where it was a dinner, somebody stole somebody's jewels and whatnot, and figured that's something I could use to rewatch, in order to rewrite the game in a better way, but also to share with other people, other teachers who say, well, what does it look like in the classroom? And 3, I had the idea of, well, if I'm doing this, kids should watch that. You know, like sports people watch game tape, not to reflect on like how well we're LARPing, but look what happened in this part of our experience, and using that as part of the reflection. So I think it's useful for many reasons to document like Reggio Teacher too. I think it will enhance the LARP as a text if I do that, but I'm not perfect at it.
I I was thinking that we often are so product oriented, and when you see the product at the end of a LARP, it's not even half the story. And maybe focus on the process would change that, at least for EduLARP.
So to spin off of that, one of the main reasons why I can't take the things that we've been doing over there and put it in a box for other people to consume is because indigenous game development and indigenous methodologies are a blossoming field right now. And for the work that I get to do amongst other indigenous communities and other scholars, I get to talk with an incredible scholar by the name of Dr. Elizabeth Lepensi, whose work in digital video work is, it doesn't, we don't have a set of methodologies scripted out yet, and so I'm hoping that with her and a number of other scholars that I get to work with on a regular basis, we get to turn this into a set of methodologies that get to be a part of game design as a field, but separate from where game design and game studies tend to collate and coalesce into in Western culture.
We have time for about one more good question. There's a hand over here earlier.
For Amanda, I heard more about the topics about what the LARPs are about, the content. But I know about you mentioned about the office LARP. What other topics do you tackle?
Well, right now kids are studying fairy tales, so I have a fairy tale LARP where we compare and contrast the different versions of the Three Little Pigs. And so characters from the Three Little Pigs, or the true story of Three Little Pigs, and the Three Little Wolves and the Big Bad Pig. You know, we all are in. We start the LARP at the end of each of those books, and imagine, well, what would happen if they all encountered each other. There is a Nordic LARP about a fairy tale committee, which I have morphed a bit for us, and we will play that next week. For math, we also, the railroad, a train or railroad LARP, Anis was in New York City 2 years ago, and we talked about measurement and the making of the railroad. It's called Train Tracks Across America. And we have used that for measurement. There's a geometry LARP about the ghostly gas is trying to destroy all the shapes in the world. For social studies, the kids learn a lot about communities and rights and responsibility of citizens. So each year the class comes up with a name. This year we are the helpful white-tailed deer. And so the kids lived in Deerland, and they lived in this community and learned how people lived together, and they had all these rights and enjoyed their rights, and then some bad guy in the community took away their rights, and they experienced what that was like. I have an Ellis Island LARP because they learn about how people become American citizens, so they had to go through the Great Hall on Ellis Island. Or like every content.